Today we are talking about another node from our math series. Today's node is placer. Placer is a very interesting node. It allows you to place your primitives or your 3D objects in different area or region and changing its parameters, size and ratios according to your liking. So it's a pretty simple and easy to use. So let's quickly get into it. So I'm going to start off with a plane just so we have a very nice surface to work with. And I'm going to increase this. And let's quickly make a division somewhere around 50. Since I'm going to be sculpting on top of this, I need some amount of high dense geometry, and I'm just gonna take maybe a build up surface tool and let's just create something to work with. And we'll also use a little bit of pull up. Let's turn off the grid. And I think we're good to go. I'm just gonna smooth everything out quickly, and I think we have a decent terrain ground sort of thing to work with. Now you can change the height according to your scale. Now once you're done with this, I'm gonna take some primitives to start off with. I already have some few primitives here, few models of plans to demonstrate. Before demonstrating this, I'm just gonna quickly show the same thing with a simple primitive. So I'm gonna take something like a sphere, and let's also take a cube and maybe a torus. Right, so there you go. And what we're gonna do is we are gonna select everything and we are gonna hit mash. And once you mash them, as usual, they will replicate and duplicate themselves onto different number of points, but we don't want any distribution whatsoever. So what I'm going to do is quickly turn off the distribution, and in the mesh we have this new node called as the placer. So I'm going to click on add placer node, and as I said, it allows you to place your geometry or your primitives manually wherever you want, and we can change the amount of size and thickness and everything. So here, as you can see, we have different type of brushes to add your geometry, remove your geometry, collide them. And for different IDs, like for example, you have multiple primitives, you can paint them separately. Then you have nudge if you want to move them around, and the usual stuff, move, scale, rotation, and so on. So I'm going to click on add since I want to add. And here you have brush radius. You can change it from here, or you can simply hit B on your keyboard and change it from here as well. And you can just simply start painting, and there you have it. Now obviously you have this ID brush. You can change the ID of what ID you want to use, which is what we are not doing right now. And we can also delete them accordingly. We can also change the collision between them. Like here you'll notice that we are colliding between them, and you can obviously change the ID, which we are going to be changing in a bit when we are using our different plans. And you can nudge them around, which is basically you can move them around and so on. And the usual stuff, you can hit move, click on your mesh placer, and let me just reduce the size of my brush. Yeah, so you can remove, and then you can simply click on your object to move them around. I think I need new objects for this, I believe. Yeah, so you have to pretty much select it from the origin. So that's how you can move them individually. And again, this goes same for scaling your object as well. There are a lot of different shortcuts of moving and scaling them, which I'm going to be sharing. So you will no longer require these options to individually move them and so on. If you want, you can use them, but I've never used them. But if you want, there are a few options which is better comparatively to this option which we are going to be using. Anyway, so you can start painting on them, and again you can also take your ID node. Like for example, we have 3 different IDs for 3 separate primitives, and once you add your ID, you'll notice that you get all of them geometry as well. And if you start painting on it again, let me just quickly remove this, and we are going to add new geometry. So you'll start to notice that we have started to add more geometry. Now we are going to use the same thing with our make real plans. So I'm just gonna leave my plane and let's delete all the mesh properties. Alright, anyways, so I'm gonna hit Shift H and hide. So these are the primitives that I have, sorry, models of different plans, and I'm gonna select all of them and hit Mash. Now, since we are using 4 different objects, 4 different 3D models, we have to take our ID node for them to separately register. And once you're done with that, just click on Placer node. Once you have the Placer node, I'm just gonna go to my distribute and make it 0, just because I don't wanna have any clones before I paint them. And we can just simply click on add and we can start painting on it on our geometry. All right, so you'll notice that we have some amount of orientation and something a bit more messed up, which we have to fix later on, but I'm just gonna start painting on it. And similarly, you can use delete brush to delete and so on. I'm just gonna reduce the brush, and you can also change the strength, how much strength you want. You want to scatter them and so on. You want to have more scatter density, you'll have more scatter density, and so on. And then again, you can collide, you have the brush for the collision, you have the rotation mode and so on. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint some objects here. Like for example, as you can see, we have this. I'm just going to remove my ID and I'm going to quickly re-add this to get our flowers back. And you just have to refresh the ID for our placer to work properly. Now, the one thing I said was you can change how you place every object here. Like you don't have to use all of this to manipulate them. And the way that you can do this is by simply holding different keys on your keyboard. Like for example, if you drag your mouse, you can pretty much add more primitives. All right, I'm just gonna take flat surface just so it's a bit more easier for us to paint. So I'm just gonna take a default plane, select everything that you have apart from plane and click on mesh. And once you're on mesh, let's select our placer node and make sure you have 0 on your distribute. And with your placer, I'm just gonna paint first. All right, so you have this, and I'm just gonna take our ID. So there you go. So again, you can use your dragging method. All right, you can use your dragging method to pretty much eliminate or paint on. And I'm just gonna reduce the size of my brush. I think it was too big. And with your painting, what you can also do is if you hold M on your keyboard, you can precisely change the overall rotation. And let's say you want to scale an object and so on. So if I hit M on my, I'm holding M and I can start painting. And now you'll notice as I paint, you can change how much scale you have on that object or where the rotation is going to be. So if I move my mouse forward and backward, you can change the rotation. You can also change where it moves and everything. So this is how you can do it. I'm just gonna quickly remove everything so we can focus on this. Let's increase this. All right, there you go. And okay, so let's say if I hit M on my keyboard, and again I can draw, I can rotate this, I can scale this and so on. So this is kind of like a precise placing. Like you want to place some objects precisely on a very specific place. So you can use that, hit M and you can start placing. All right, if you hold shift and then drag, you can scale them up pretty much. Like for example, let's say you painted them but you're not sure about their scale and everything. You don't have to use this. You can simply hit shift and you can scale them up and down. As simple as that. So again, you can change the size of your brush, and the fall off will decide then how much you're going to effect on them and whatnot. So that's how you do it. So if your fall off is pretty big, you'll notice that other plants will start to get affected as well. So you don't want that. So make sure your brush size is pretty reasonable. Apart from that, you can also hold control if you want a negative scale, or let's say you want to shrink them down. You can use control on your keyboard to shrink them down, and if you use shift on your keyboard, again you can scale them up. So it's totally up to you. So you can use that as well. And again, if you hold J on your keyboard, you can pretty much change the alignment on your brush strokes. and this is how you can do that. Right, if you have more objects, you'll be able to visualize it more properly, as you can see. So this is how you can do that. Now let's say if you have a lot of objects which are colliding, like here, what you can do is you can go to your collider brush and you can start eliminating those interactions that they have more and more, and you can start separating them. If you want to nudge it back, what you can also do is you can use nudge to pretty much separate them. All right, make sure that you use smaller amount of brush because it's too powerful for this particular object, since I'm using a very high dense model. But if we were to use it on primitive, I'm just gonna quickly delete this and maybe take some default primitive, just so it's a bit easier for us to understand. And let's reduce the distribute, take a placer, and with placer let's take our ID as well. And once you're done with this, my bad, make sure to select your brush and you can start painting and everything. So let's say if you have objects which are intersecting with each other, what you can do is you can use the collide brush, and I'm just gonna scale them a bit, and you can start changing them, or we have to a little bit nudge them down. All right, yeah, there you go. So apparently your brush strokes affects on how much it's going to separate and whatnot, so you have to kind of keep painting on them to really get that out. It's kind of like that. So you can do that, you can nudge them, which will allow you to have this kind of effect. And then again you can use different ID, you can delete them and you can start placing them. You can hit M to drag precisely and paint precisely on how you want to place them. And yeah, so then you can hit J to pretty much orient them on your path, and shift to scale up, and I can select an area and I can start painting on them. And if you hit control, you can shrink them down, whatever area you're painting on. So this is very interesting if you have a lot of blocks, or you're trying to create a very low poly design of your something like a rock, like you have a scene where there's a lot of debris and a lot of particles and so on. What you can do is you can triangulate this geometry, and you can use a reduction method and increase the percentage you have. And let's say this is your low poly stone or a simple rock, and we duplicate it to a different time, maybe have multiple spheres with different reduction values and so on. And from there what you can do is you can mash them, and let's take a placer, and with placer let's quickly have our ID, and we'll have our add, and then we can start painting them, maybe like this is our area. Okay, and then we can obviously change our collide and everything, and we can also change our nudge to create that randomization. And what we can also do is from here we can manipulate our brush to have a smaller stroke, and we can just start adding or reducing in a very specific area. So I'm just gonna quickly hit B on my keyboard and left click to increase your mouse, and from here I can change the orientation, everything, and the scalar value, and that's it. So as you can see, it is kind of pushing our entire object downwards. So if you want to contribute to this, what we can also do is we can have our offset node, and we can just sorry, not the orient, the offset. There you go. And from here what you can use your positioning to change them along. If the strength of your object is too much or your brush is too much, then you can use this to contribute towards that. But yeah, it is pretty good. You can if you want a very precise result with your placer, let's say you're painting, then you can obviously use the manual placing, which is by hitting M, and you can start painting on them. So that is another way of doing this. I mean, it is pretty quick. You don't have to be that much precise even with that. And then again, you can start playing around with it. to according to your liking, and then you can obviously change the collision and everything. And that's it. So it is a pretty fun node to play around with when you're having a lot of distribution and everything. So you can use that, and again you can obviously scale them up and scale them down if you want to have a different feel towards how the rocks are being distributed. And also can take a simple scalar value. Let's maybe use it on our mesh offset. Yeah, there you go. And maybe have a scalar value between a little bit on your y-axis, just so they don't look so roundish, and instead they have this flatty looking surface. And again, you can also use your positioning if your rocks are being painted on different surface area, so you can use that to pretty much manage them as well. You can also use your snap to paint meshes, which is basically if you allow your plane here, then it will automatically snap to it as well. I don't like to do it because I would like to have them like a free transform kind of thing. So what you can also do is, I'm gonna maybe let's take this one, and this one. Yeah. And if you match them, let's have zero distribution, we'll have placer, and we'll also have some ID. And in the placer we'll have this plane, and there you go. So we can start painting and everything. And I'm just gonna have some bigger rocks somewhere around like this. All right, and then again you can change the amount of collision, like you have like a cobblestone or something. And then again you can have this kind of like small and bigger rocks. All right, and now it will align in the same area, so it won't just go up and down aggressively. So you can use that as well. Now again, there are something that as you can see, they are kind of in the middle of your plane, which is going to happen with every single node in your mesh. Now that for that, if you want to fix that, there is a simple node which is offset. We are going to be doing the same thing. We can just increase the position of it, and there you have it. If you want to have like a definite rotation and everything, you can do that as well, or instead just have a randomized node. So the way you add more realism to your placer is by having multiple nodes with different properties, and I'm just don't want to use this. And then you can have a little bit of rotation, and there you go. So now you have multiple rocks. If you feel like deleting some of the rocks, and if you feel like adding more, then you can go back. And since we are doing everything procedurally here with multiple nodes, everything will be kept adding on and on. We can still again use our randomize random node and everything, and we can delete them, and you'll notice how it's kind of being affected to everyone, and so on. So yeah, it is a pretty interesting node to play around with. So have fun with it, create something interesting. You can have something like a planter and everything to paint on. Just make sure you use a very low poly amount, or use it to manually place them with your placer node. As you can see, they are pretty highly dense, each one of them. But I've used them with the mesh. I don't usually use placer with the for this type of purpose. I use them usually for creating like a rock and cobblestone or something like that for small debris. But if you're using something for a plant, I think it's very important to understand that if you have a highly dense geometry, it's best to have a region where you wanna like add them. Like for example, if I'm going to add such bushes or plants to some areas, then I basically do this type of selection, and then it's easier for me to create this plants. Like for example, if you match them and just take your ID node, so you can simply take a mesh and then you can drop in your plane, and then you can keep adding more and more amounts of mesh as much as you want. All right, and then you can obviously hide your geometry, so no matter what you do, it will be in the same position. From there you can start having more fun with it, maybe changing the scalar value, the rotation value, and so on and so on. So if you are using something like this which is highly dense, then it is advisable to just go with the mesh method, distribution method. Yeah. Anyway, so that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed this note. Have fun with this, and I'll see you next time.